Good morning, everybody. You made it through the weekend and you're here for a Monday morning bright and early at 6 o'clock. Yes. All right, let's start your Monday off in the right way, the way you know best. You may notice some changes to the look and feel this morning, and those will be happening through the course of this week. We got lots of exciting things happening. Among them, here she is, the woman that you woke up for, Leigh-Ann Mole. Good morning, ass. How are you?
Hola.
How are you doing?
All good. I like the turquoise.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a change. We decided
Looks good.
yeah, he decided to have a go at giving us a new look and feel. So I thought it's about time. You got to keep refreshing and renewing this stuff. You know, you don't want to get tired of the same old, same old. So it's all happening. It's Monday. Supposedly tomorrow. Tomorrow's the 21st. Is the shortest day of the year. Dun dun dun. So then we finally are on the other side of the middle of winter tomorrow. But my God, if you were anywhere except in your bed this weekend, you would have felt all of that. You didn't need me to tell you, right?
Yeah,
Bloody
it was
hell.
ass paralyzingly cold, as you'd put it.
Yeah, that's the only way to put it. And tell me, have you had all the birthday celebrations for this month already? They're all done?
Yeah, all done. And then, it's Mother's Day, and then my mom's and my birthday, and then Father's Day. So Father's Day signals the end of a bit of a batch of spending time together. I think what I'm excited about is there's one more thing for me to receive for my birthday.
Yes.
And that's coming this week. It's a new pair of glasses. Went and had my eyes
library
tested.
glasses. Are they going to be ones that an old librarian might wear?
So at this point, I was not even looking at the frame because generally I wear glasses because I can't see far.
Right.
But what happens in your 40s
Tell me.
is you start to not be able to see close either. So you think it would just even itself out, but no. It results in you having to wear, and they always sound like granny things, bifocals.
Oh, no, Leigh-Ann. No.
But beyond that, those aren't even good enough.
No. Oh, God. What is it?
I've
What
had
do you need? Do you need telescopic ones? Do you have those ones?
multifocals.
You have those ones like Thomas Edison used to wear, not Thomas Edison, Ben Franklin. We used to have to swap the lenses the whole time. They had like a little lever on the side, and then you'd go click, 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 and you'd change the actual lenses.
Yeah. So no, these are multifocals. So
Oh my God.
when I remember bifocals, I remember my gran had them, and they had this like distinct half moon shape on the lens, where some of it would magnify, and she'd have to move her head up and down. Now it's different. Now you don't see that on the lens, thank goodness. Right. They just play with the thickness. But like he explained, instead of reading with your eyes, going from left to right, you now need to read with your nose so that you can keep the glasses.
Jesus, this is
dying.
embarrassing.
Literally.
Oh my God. You know, how long do you think it's going to be until we have to take you out into the yard and shoot you?
Listen, I've been working my way up to it pretty steadily. Don't apply pressure. I'm getting there.
I meant to wear these most of the time, right? So I meant to actually have these on when I'm looking at a screen or I'm doing the show or whatever. And I can still do all of the things without straining and without getting headaches and all of that shit, including driving at night and reading a lot of stuff and looking at screens the whole time. So I don't feel like I should be wearing them all the time. I do wear them sometimes. Like if I've got a lot of very, very focused work to do, then it kind of helps because you just, it's one less thing to have to worry about.
When you're making bombs and things.
Yeah, because that's what I do all day, making bombs. This is making me sound like a terrorist. Put me on some watch list now because of this. It's so goddamn irritating to get old. And I was with my parents for Father's Day yesterday. It's so difficult to see them getting old. The way they walk, the way
Yeah.
they take a long time to say something, the way
Yeah.
these two, I mean, they've been together now, what, 46 years or something, and I mean, there isn't an opportunity where my mother doesn't take a swipe at my dad or vice versa. They're just hilarious, but at the same time, you think, oh my God, if I were a 7-year-old, I'd think they hated each other. But getting old is so tough, man. I think about this all the time because someone said something very nice to me on Friday. It's like, oh, you seem like you don't get old, which I thought was sweet. But I know I can feel it, like the kind of thing that would get me to get out of bed and rush around and do a million things a day. I mean, I can still summon that power up, but I can maybe summon it up for 2 days a week. It's not something I could do. And I took it for granted when I was 22. I was like,
Yeah.
this is something that's how it's going to be forever. And look, I don't want to moan and complain about this because I do think you get wiser and you get better at conserving useless energy. Like you would have wasted a ton of energy either trying to get laid or trying to get rich quick or trying to win at things that you weren't really meant to win at. There was a whole bunch of stuff that I do not look back on and think, oh, well, that was a clever move. You did so well to do all of that stupid shit. There's a lot of it that I'm glad is over. That's in the past that I'm happy to move on from. But oh my God, you do. There's certain things that it's sore to do. This sounds horrible. My parents have the
absolutely.
fattest Jack Russell you've ever seen in your life. She's enormous. She's shaped like a concrete bollard and weighs twice as much. And I picked her up yesterday, and I thought, fucking hell, my elbow, something's gone wrong here. Oh my God. Anyway.
So for Father's Day, I gave my dad, he's got such a sweet tooth, but he can afford to because he's, as mentioned, a cyclist. And
Yes,
he's
of course.
as skinny as a toothpick. But I bought him these chocolates and nougats and wrapped them in a pile. And at the bottom were those gummies that look like teeth.
Oh yeah, I love
because
those.
he's lost so many teeth. So I said to him, you can use these to chew through the other sweets. He even jokes and says, I'll be back now. I'm just going to go and brush my gums. Oh, gosh.
That's terrible. All right, well, we're not going to sit here and moan about this shit all day, but it was probably Father's Day is a good time to remark on this stuff.
Yeah.
And I do have to say, like, I've thought about this too. You have to draw a line. This whole idea of like, oh, well, I might be a father or whatever. And I've always said, you can always have a kid at whatever age, but you need energy for that. So I'm gonna say moratorium ends at like, and I hate saying never ever say never, right? I'm thinking you got to draw a line somewhere around 53, 54. Then you can't after that. After that, it's too late. You just got to give up. You got to move on. You got to decide that you can be an interesting part of the world, make your difference without having to leave your progeny behind. So that's kind of where my head's at. But I hope you had a good Father's Day. I hope you had a good weekend. If you are a father, I hope that you were given some love and kindness and some respect for a change, because so many fathers in this country are like an accessory to so many kids, not by choice always, but sometimes by choice. And we know what a big problem that is in this country. So it's funny to me that every Father's Day is usually quite a quiet day on social media. It's not a day where people are their usual snappy selves, because they're seeing that there are some people in the world who have good relationships with their dad. And I think it hurts a lot of people because they might not have that. And if you felt that way yesterday, then I certainly don't take any pleasure in it. And I'm sure that, you will do a better job if you are raising your own kids. And if you're not, and you're able to be that role model for someone else, then go ahead and do that in the best way possible. Also, my God, did the asshole fall out of Bitcoin over the weekend. It got to $18,000 at some point. And, again, I'm trying to be optimistic about things, but I just see this world economy. And really, this is not just a weird a concatenation of events. This is not some kind of bad luck, we're in a down spiral. No, we have been managed into this economy. We've been managed into the disaster that we're in at the moment. The reason everything is costing you more is because the powers that be in politics have made the stupidest decisions in recorded human history. Ever since 2020, when this coronavirus came around, and all the governments of the world lost their collective minds at exactly the same time. Every decision they've made since then has been a disaster, and most especially those concerning the economy. This whole situation with Russia and the Ukraine has been mismanaged beyond belief. I saw a very scary clip which was being shared yesterday. A guy called David Sachs, who I follow on a podcast called All In. He's fantastic, and he put up this tweet which got me a little bit worried. I actually tried to get the video, but it's going to be too difficult for me to find it now, and I don't want to waste time, getting you all ramped up into what I saw at fucking 9 o'clock last night or whatever. But the fact is, there's this dude who's busy explaining, listen, the thing you don't want to do, and this guy is he's a researcher and an international relations expert who's been watching the behavior of superpowers for the last 30, 40 years. And he's an old man now. He says, what you've got to understand about this whole Russia-Ukraine situation is that the more you back Russia into a corner, the more dangerous they become. And the world has no understanding anymore because it's been so long since the Cold War. And the number of people who are actually alive who saw nuclear weapons being dropped on Japan or saw them being tested in the Pacific or in Nevada or in Novaya Zemlya, the number of people who can actually tell you those stories of what these nuclear weapons can do and what they are, it's a vanishingly small number of people. And we've forgotten the extraordinary end result that could occur when a nuclear superpower feels like it's being backed into a corner. Now, Russia is no longer a superpower by any means, but they are nuclear. And the more we push this, you know what they say about a bear, right? And Russia's symbol is the bear. And if you eventually back a bear into a corner, it attacks you with all of its might. And all of its might in the case of Russia means that they could be crazy enough. Everybody keeps telling us Vladimir Putin's crazy. They could be crazy enough to do the unthinkable and start some kind of really ugly nuclear thing going. And we cannot afford that as a world. And if we keep on fighting with them and we keep on pushing this bullshit agenda of like, we're not going to use oil and we're going to, you've got to understand, like the world is a place of real, not a place of imagined. I had this conversation with Ben on Friday. And the people who live in fantasy just don't seem to understand that the reality is there isn't enough wind and solar power. There isn't enough green energy. There aren't enough electric vehicles to deal with this carbon, dioxide emission problem that you say we have. So we've got to be realistic. The world needs to develop, and to develop, it needs oil and it needs gas. And we need those things in large quantities, and Russia can provide them. And instead of striking a deal with Russia, the world leaders, and I'm talking about the people in the G20 or the G7 or however many numbers you want to put in there. It's basically America, the most powerful countries in Europe. And then if you include China and Russia and Japan, those are the only, maybe India, then you've got the whole picture, right? The rest don't really matter. That includes us here in the south of Africa, includes most of our African neighbors, includes most of South America. We don't really matter. But those countries, when they get together and they decide, oh no, we're going to do this, it just doesn't make sense sometimes, the decisions that they make. The decisions they made during coronavirus about the actual virus and our response to it, the economic decisions they made since then, this preoccupation they have with Vladimir Putin and with Russia, the preoccupation that they had with Donald Trump before that. It's very, very dangerous. It's putting the world in a less safe position, not a more safe position. And it does worry me. These are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about often. When I saw that clip last night, I was like, oh God, okay, yeah, this is what I've been thinking about. So this is more important.
What a thing to watch before you go to sleep. Oh,
I know. And this is not what I wanted to wake up thinking about this morning, but this is what I went to sleep thinking about last night. and it means a damn lot more than Father's Day, you know. So let's just keep our perspective on these things, because otherwise it's going to drive us crazy. Now, speaking of dumb leaders and the dumb things they do, when is the world going to stop telling me that Joe Biden is a great leader? When are they going to stop telling me that this guy's compos mentis, and when he can actually figure out where the fuck he is on any given day? He doesn't know if he's a teapot or a hockey stick. They put him on a bicycle in Delaware and let him ride around on his bicycle. He had obviously, the Secret Service following in big vans. You could see them in the video. But this idiot falls off his bike in front of everybody, including the news crews. And then what they do, which is so predictable, is they cut the camera as soon as he falls, because they don't want us to see this pathetic, senile old man who's trying to hold things together for the Democrats, and they just cannot. It's just outrageously embarrassing. Am I wrong? You saw the clip, right?
Yeah. Again, it was that situation where you were voting for anyone but Trump. Anyone.
Yeah. Right.
And this is now the reality's hitting, and this is what you've been left with. But he was wrapping up this ride, fell down, and everyone's immediate reaction was to block the cameras. So it makes you think how much else has been, hidden.
Yeah.
And
don't these guys realize, like, the days of spin are over, and you can call the rest of us conspiracy theorists as much as you like, because that doesn't hurt us anymore. And frankly, I don't care if you demonetize something on YouTube, or you cancel me from Twitter or whatever else. It's not going to stop me from thinking that you're completely wrong and that everything you've backed has fallen apart. And that narrative is coming true, whether people like it or not. As it is with the Russian narrative, which is going ahead. And then I see things, in the news about the World Economic Forum, and it's like, come on, guys, don't you see that the people of the world are so much wiser now? They can find information like they were never able to find before. It's very difficult to spin stuff to people who are not listening to you, because you have no credibility. Mainstream media, the academy, the governments of the world, all these supranational bodies. I mean, I met some people 2 weeks ago when I went to these embassy events that I went to, from the United Nations. I felt kind of sorry for these people, because they were traipsing around. No one cares about them. No one wants to talk to them. No one is interested in what the United Nations have to say anyway. I mean, it's just such a sad, pathetic throwback. And I mean, we'll talk about this in Collectomania later on, but one of the people who founded the United Nations in its original form, the League of Nations, who was our Prime Minister, Jan Smuts, the whole point of creating that organization was to prevent wars like we're seeing in the Ukraine now. And if the UN can't do that, then they're just a very, very expensive, very, very inefficient bureaucracy, which we don't need, because we've already got those in every country in the world. So I don't see the point of them anymore. There's stuff that we have to get rid of. Anyway, I do want to move on, because there are a lot of things we have to talk about this morning. And as I mentioned, Collectomania later on, I have got a chance today to tell you about my collection of books, which we'll get to a bit later on.
Ooh.
Yeah, I collect so many things. This is one of the ones. So I spent last night also preparing for that, so I could show you a couple of those. And hopefully that'll be interesting. Dr. Hanan is going to join us in a short while. We're going to talk to him. It's going to be okay with Dr. Hanan on a Monday morning. This is how we start our week, so we can get right in there and sort out our heads first. Also, apparently there's a story about 8 passengers, this is amazing, who got off a Qatar Airways plane, and they tried to sneak into South Africa through secret tunnels. Now, do we have secret tunnels at OR Tambo?
Well, they're secret, so we don't know. But how did these people know?
How does this happen? We have secret tunnels in OR Tambo?
Yeah. So these passengers, I sounded like an Australian there. So these 8 men, 4 from Bangladesh, 4 from Pakistan. They didn't have visas to enter South Africa. They were supposed to be transiting through South Africa to another country. And now you remember that, I think it was 2015, transit visas were no longer required if you were transiting through South Africa. But Home Affairs from this incident have now said we're looking at reinstating them.
So what is it? So transit visa is what? If you land in this country and
you still need to have a visa to land in this country. Yeah.
Okay, that's right. Make it even more difficult for people to come here. All right. Let's see what happens here. Give them the benefit of the doubt. So what went on in this story?
So they allegedly got off of the plane when they weren't supposed to, right? And then, I mean, I know from being in transit, they check your ticket again as you're leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they got into the airport, went up to what just looks like a fire hydrant, but obviously had inside information. You could see some of them, when they look back at the footage, talking on their phones. So they were kind of being guided through this process. And behind this fire hydrant is this tunnel system, which is all part of a fire prevention system. A police officer noticed them and followed them into this tunnel access point. So
wow,
they managed to start getting into this back system before they were bust.
It's not like a secret tunnel that leads somewhere. Really, it's just basically it's a almost like in those old houses they used to have, where the servants use a certain staircase, and then the people who live in the house use another staircase. It's like a back route that the staff might use.
It's like an infrastructure thing, so it houses certain pipes and yeah. But I mean, you can get through it as a human being.
And these guys tried to make a run for it by using these tunnels to have to bypass customs?
Yes, exactly. But thank goodness this police officer found them and they've been arrested. And now it means that transit visas might be, required again.
Okay. Well, that is a story in the news. So let me tell you about it, because clearly this is something people are thinking about right now. So, okay. Transit visas, something you probably haven't thought about or given a moment's notice to for the longest time. Apparently, Home Affairs playing around with the idea of reinstating these. The actual story comes to us this morning from ENCA, which they're reputable, right? We don't think they're. There's your morning sneeze. I knew it was coming. All right. So South Africa has decided, and Aaron Motsoaledi, who's the Home Affairs Minister, who used to be the Minister of Health before Zweli Mkhize was made the Minister of Health. Remember? Because that's what happens in our cabinet. We just shuffle people around.
Yeah, you can switch from knowing everything about medicine to knowing about Home Affairs.
And basically, it all has to do with your loyalty to the ANC. But let's leave that alone for a minute. In 2015, Home Affairs stopped transit visas for people who were passing through the country. But to curb illegal activities, they've been reinstated. Transit visas are issued to foreigners who pass through South Africa en route to neighboring countries. Motsoaledi was speaking following the arrest of Bangladeshi and Pakistani nationals who attempted to enter the country illegally this week. He said, "We're going to demand transit visas. If you transit here to Eswatini, we must understand. Even if they were not caught here, they were going to continue to Eswatini. They go to Eswatini and come back through our porous borders. We have border management now," he said. "We are deciding in Home Affairs to reinstate the transit visas." I love the way that government people think that if they make a rule, everyone's going to follow them. You can't execute on this stuff. The reason we have porous borders, Aaron Motsoaledi, is because no matter how many laws you've made, people from Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, Swaziland, Lesotho, they just walk across the border because you guys can't control the borders. So you're going to go to Parliament, you're going to make new laws, you're going to reinstate old visas, but you still can't manage the borders, right? It's like, who are you trying to kid, dummy? These people really are ridiculously stupid, these government ministers. They are among the dumbest people I have ever heard of in my life. Corona's boring, says Koos Becker is a dickhead at ENCA is as reputable as the ANC. So you're screwing up a couple of things there, Corona's boring. First of all, Koos Becker is not in charge of ENCA. ENCA is not owned by Naspers. Naspers used to be Koos Becker's business. He's not involved there anymore. He retired and he still owns shares in it, but he's no longer in charge at Naspers. And Naspers has nothing to do with ENCA. So make sure you clean up your very messy mind this morning, please. We don't want to have you embarrass yourself a third time today. because those two things are not related. One thing is not like the other.
Not like the other.
Yeah, correct. Today is World Refugee Day, according to Empty Apology. Well, I suppose we're already doing our bit for World Refugee Day in South Africa, aren't we? I mean, take a look. Go
Counts,
downtown.
doesn't it?
Yeah, go downtown in Pretoria, Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban. You will see how many people from all over the rest of the continent we have living here. And who knows, probably even some dodgy Europeans like Radovan Kretscher, who's still languishing in a South African jail at taxpayers' expense. These are also people who are refugees, effectively, because they've come here either legally or illegally, and they've got through Aaron Motsoaledi's porous borders that he spoke about. So there we go.
Fire tunnels.
We're already doing our bit for World Refugee Day, so you don't have to do more than you're already doing. In fact, this morning you can wake up content in the knowledge that your country is doing its bit, either advertently or inadvertently, for World Refugee Day. All right, so I don't know whether you've noticed I mentioned the Bitcoin price earlier, but there are also some other things on the stock markets of the world that everybody's a little bit worried about. The US stock market tanked again at the end of last week and is looking particularly bad at the moment. So I think a lot of people are just starting to get a bit concerned about how all of this is going to affect whether or not you have more or less money, at the end of the next year. And by less money, we don't mean in terms of actual cash, because you might have saved money. You might think it's going to make things better. But the fact is, like, your money's just going to be worth a whole lot less.
Yeah,
because
you can save as much as you like. There's inflation soaring worldwide.
Correct. And again, this is down to how badly it's been managed by people in powerful positions all over the world. Let's just look at one or two more headlines while we're doing this. Someone's suing Elon Musk for listen to this, $258 billion. It's one of the investors in Dogecoin. Remember that? That was a whole thing. Originally created as a joke, but whose value increased and fell as it was promoted by Elon Musk. Filed a $258 billion lawsuit Thursday against the billionaire and his companies Tesla and SpaceX. Keith Johnson. Doesn't that just sound like the name? It's almost like a name that was made up. Here's Keith Johnson, right? It's like
not his real name.
Keith Johnson says he lost money after investing in Dogecoin, described himself as an American citizen who was defrauded by what he called a Dogecoin crypto pyramid scheme. He's asking for his motion filed in a New York court to be classified as a class action suit on behalf of those who have suffered losses by investing in Dogecoin since 2019. What makes you think, because it's certainly my thinking on this, makes you think that if it was possible to sue someone for losing money on an investment, especially a very speculative investment like Dogecoin, people would be doing it every day, right? And there's no such thing as insider trading here, because there can't be insider trading when it comes to crypto. Not in the way that you could insider trade on stocks, for example. It's all speculation. You can't sue Elon Musk. You can't sue anyone for losing money in Bitcoin or in Dogecoin or in Ethereum, right? It's ridiculous. If you could do this, people would be suing all the time, right, Leigh-Ann?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of crazy. Mfundo says that one poor spaza shop that is not opening in some township in South Africa due to the arrest of those guys at OR Tambo. That's true. That's probably what's happened.
Yeah, where there was a gap in the market for a cellular repair shop.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
if we're going to be stereotypical, goodness me.
That's exactly where. By the way, Pumi was saying on the show on Thursday last week, the week before last, because this last Thursday was obviously a holiday. She went and had her whole phone fixed. It fell into a cooler box with water in it, and she took it to this dude at the Oriental Plaza. He fixed it for her in no time. So you know what? Even the illegal immigrants who've been arrested, you could need them at one time, and you're going to wish they were there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there've been so many times where I've popped into this one shop where it is that stereotypical shop.
Yes.
And the guys will fix something on my phone or one of my devices for free. They'll just kind of flip a switch or put a stick in something and it works. And I'm one of those people who was taught, if you've got this brand of car, you take it to that dealership and you don't get it serviced by the dodgy shop down the road. And I was always taught to do that. And with my computer, I've always been like, go to the iStore. And then recently I saw a video. There was a hidden camera issue going on where they sent in a phone or something. They jigged the phone where it just needed, one kind of change. If you opened it up, it needed one little, I don't know, electronics, but something was not stuck where it needed to be stuck.
All right.
And they took it to the iStore and they were going to charge them. They said, you need a new phone. This is not fixable.
Oh, wow.
And then they took it to it's not iFix or UFix or it's WeFix. They took it to a WeFix store in whichever country it was. And the guy literally did it for free and reconnected what needed to be done. So it's made me rethink, now I do go to those stores. I'm not scared of sticking to doing the right thing.
And also, we've lost so much respect for experts during the last 2 years because experts have let us down horribly, that now you're prepared to take your chance with someone else and you want a second opinion on things, medical, technological, and every other kind. So I think we must look at all of that. That's really interesting. Also, these guys probably know quite a lot about what they're doing because they're doing it every single day on 100 different phones. So maybe they're actually better at it than the people who specialize in just one particular thing. I think it's worth considering these people. All right. So apparently this is quite a scary story talking about the economy. Revlon, which is a well-known makeup brand, been around for, I would like to say 100 years, but it's probably about 60, 70 years. So Revlon have filed for bankruptcy. And we were just saying the other day that if you get into women's makeup, you would be doing incredibly well because there's just a couple of $100 billion, in fact, probably dollar business going on there where you're selling women makeup and you're selling them, lipstick and eyeliner and blush and eyeshadow and foundation and God knows what else. And you're making an absolute killing. I mean, some of the richest people in the world are selling women's beauty products. So how come Revlon has seen its ass?
Well, apparently, and it's difficult for me to believe, but especially, my business is social media for brands and a lot of the time makeup brands. And we know how big that is on social media. We know about makeup influencers. They were, pretty much the first people to start these tutorials, these online tutorials, and were the ones to grow amass huge followings right from the beginning. And they're still doing it. It's still that successful. But apparently Revlon kind of missed the boat when it came to these things. As an influencer, you get given these products for free and then you test them out and you do your thing. And they kind of said, no, we're not really into it. We're not just, we're just going to look past that. And because of that, their rivals like L'Oreal and Estee Lauder, and even these upstart makeup and, personal care brands have totally overtaken them. And they've been consistent in using video bloggers and Instagram personalities. Revlon kind of missed the boat with that. And it's come back to bite them, which shows you as a brand how important social media is. Even though there was a study released recently which said that only 10% of a brand's sales are due to social media. But it's about getting the awareness out there. Influencer means influencer for a reason. People trust them and they're going to go out and buy the stuff.
I'm looking at the Revlon share price. It was at $454 just before 2000. Okay, so just before the year 2000, it was at $454 a share. By 2004, it had dropped to $21.79. By now, it's at $3.73. it's gone down the toilet. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Even though their revenue is good and their net income over the last year has been okay, they just have not been able to realize the kind of earnings that they promised they would. Also, this is where you've got to be realistic: is that companies, they have an outlook, they have a kind of a projection of where they're going. You know, you hear about this in EBITDA, the price earnings ratio, and how you value a company. And a lot of this stuff is just pulled straight out of the air. It's straight out of the air. I mean, they're making it up. Zuzile says, Revlon, Jenny Button, Stutterfords. Shoo, it's really scares us as small entrepreneurs. But Kazalunga, you know what? You have a better chance as a small business because you can manage things. Like, the bigger these businesses get, the harder it gets to actually manage them.
And
you got
how
so many
the bigger it
involved.
is, the bigger a tiny mistake can be. I mean,
yeah.
if you miss out on one influencer as a small business, it's not going to kill you. You can always, fix it. But this tiny mistake ended up being huge. I mean, you think about it. So it's actually 90 years old, this company.
Sure.
They started selling nail polishes during the Great Depression. And then they later added coordinated lipsticks in those days where your lips had to match your nails. By 1955, the brand was international. And then there was an acrimonious takeover in 1985 by a holding company. But to think that how much they've been through, and to think that social media took them down. So the biggest problem that they had were their debts, which they were unable to pay, their creditors. So they, in April, listed their assets at $2.3 billion and their debts as $3.7 billion. So therein the problem lies.
Unreal.
So, I mean, for something that came about through the Great Depression to be taken down by influencers or non-influencers is quite a thing.
Yeah, that's quite scary. I can't believe it. Like, Revlon is something that everybody's had on their lips, pardon the pun, for years. I mean, like, Revlon is a name that's just, you didn't think would ever go away. It's like, Kodak in cameras used to be a thing, and Nokia in cell phones, and look at what's happened. I'll tell you what, this is an exciting time to be alive. There is no doubt that the things that we used to believe in, the things that we thought would last forever, are starting to run out of life cycle. And it's an exciting thing to see. It's not great. It's not a winner for everybody, but it's definitely a time for you with new ideas, with exciting kind of foresight and a little bit of risky behavior and some lucky bets. You could make a ton of money these days. Tracy says, with Revlon, they never evolved. They still used ingredients that aren't sustainably sourced, etc. They are one of the main culprits when it comes to testing in animals too. So I think that probably turned on them as well. They also bought over Elizabeth Arden a few years ago and pretty much caused their downfall too. So I think that it sounds to me like Revlon's management were just really bad. They didn't know what they were doing. Very, very bad management.
Evolution is the entirety of the problem there, whether it's your ingredients or how you market your products. And the older a company is, the more they're likely to say, no, we've always done this and it's always worked, so we're not changing.
Right.
They're scared of changing.
They get stuck in their ways. And that's true for relationships. It's true for business. It's true for friendships. Eventually you have to evolve. And this is hugely important. Change is inevitable. Nothing lasts forever. Yeah, I love it.
And, you think something, certainly 10 years ago, you'd think it might be cheapening your brand to put it in the hands of Jeffree Star or something like that. And that's why there was a lot of resistance. But you have to have the foresight. It's so easy to miss.
Right. That is so right. Okay, and moving from that point to something of the psychological dimension, because that's what we do on a Monday morning. We talk about evolution. We talk about improving the ideas and changing the ideas when new information comes up. We've got Dr. Hanan Bushkin coming in a moment or two. And he is, of course, a renowned psychologist. He's the head of the Anxiety and Trauma Clinic in Johannesburg. And someone called Wounded at Work sent us an email about bullying in the workplace that she's experiencing at the moment. So I'm going to go through this quickly. We call her Wounded at Work. She says, I would like to remain anonymous, but I have a slight problem in my workplace. A certain group and type of women are hindering my development and career growth prospects within our organization. They have profiled and spread malicious rumors about my personality as being cold and ruthless to key C-suite management people. So I wonder if this is something that Dr. Hanan has dealt with before in his practice. We'll find out. Doc, it's nice to see you. How are you?
Hey guys, I'm well. How are you?
Good. Happy Monday morning. So you heard this person is having trouble. She's a woman. She's having trouble from other women in the organization. She says a certain type of woman. I don't know if that's a fair characterization from her point of view. It seems to be fair. What do we make of this? How do you stop people from being malicious and spreading ugliness about you in the workplace? And if you can't stop them, how can you deal with it yourself? How can you make yourself less susceptible to this kind of thing in the workplace? Because it can affect careers, right?
It affects careers. It affects mental health. It's workplace bullying is a very prevalent and very important and something that's quite uncommon and significant because most people, significantly so, will experience some form of workplace bullying. And the victims, so to speak, are mainly women, and they're men bullying women and women, believe it or not, bullying women. And most people that bully are either on the same level or mostly are one level ahead of you or above you. So they have leverage over you. And the reason why it is so prevalent and sometimes even accepted is because unfortunately in big corporates, you get rewarded for contributing to the bottom line, and bullies are generally very strong characters. They're very robust. They seem very confident. They get the job done, and corporate, in a lot of cases, reward this kind of behavior towards other people as long as they get the job done. And when you think about bullying, you think about, a boss screaming at an employee. But bullying can be could seem very much more subtle than that. It could be subtle form of harassment. It could be verbal bullying. It could be intimidation. And for those that are listening through my practice, I've summarized the 4 different types of bullying that I think you want to be aware of, because you want to label it for what it is. As you know, I'm a big fan of labeling things accurately, because when you label things accurately, you can deal with it. So an analogy is, if your car is broken down and I just go, well, my car is broken down, that doesn't mean anything. But the moment I go, well, the front right tire is flat, now I can start dealing with it because I've labeled it specifically and accurately. So in the workplace, you got to label things accurately and specifically so you can start dealing with it accurately and efficiently. So the first type of bullying is the other type of bullying. This is like the aggressive. You see it a mile away, the people that scream and shout and belittle people, and they don't care who is in front of them, who is watching, and who's being affected. So we call this type the aggressive type of bullying. The second type of bullying is the back-ended critic, the one that's always taking a jab, but it seems like a compliment, but it's a jab, and it seems like they're trying to help you through your career and trying to develop you, but all they're doing is they bringing you down. That's what we call the back-end critic. The third type of bullying is somebody that manipulates by withholding resources. So you want to improve on your career, you want to advance in your career, but you have somebody that has the leverage and power over resources, and they just are not giving you the tools to succeed. And they're not doing it for any other reason because they do not want you to succeed. Now, by the way, just in line with that, a lot of bullying occurs not with higher management attacking lower management. It's actually somebody that's just one level above you because they are threatened by your success. They don't want to go for the lowest ranking employee because they're not threatened by that. They're threatened by somebody that might take their position away from them. So withholding of resources is a great way to slow your progress down or your process down and your self-development in your work, and therefore not be a threat to the bullying. And the fourth type of bullying, I call these people the jester. These are the two-faced individuals, the ones that seem that they want to help you, but behind the scene they start meddling. They start murking your name. They start murking your reputation. They start dirting and throwing some accusations around. But to your face, they are your so-called best friend, the two-faced jester. And all those types of bullying happens. Most people will experience it throughout their career. Now, the question is, what do you do once you're aware of it? Once you've labeled it, and it's okay to say, I am being bullied. That's okay. It's okay. Name it. And I'm being bullied by a particular person in a particular way. Well, I've written down 7 things that I want you to take into account if that does happen to you. So the first thing is, this is quite important. You want to speak up early. You want to speak up early, because the moment you set the tone and you set the precedence to a bully that they can, then they will. So you want to speak up as soon as you label the front right tire being flat. Deal with it immediately. Don't wait. Don't keep on driving, so to speak. Don't keep on and pretending that it's going to go away by itself, because usually it doesn't. It gets progressively worse. And when you do speak up, then you are the bad person that, well, what's your problem kind of thing. So speak up early. The moment you pick it up, you speak up. Now, by the way, it doesn't mean that when you do speak up early that you have to create a whole circus around it. You can have an amicable, honest, transparent conversation with the person and ask them, well, what is the issue? What is the problem? Do they feel that you can do things better? How do you renegotiate the rules of the game and the communication? So, but you got to speak up early. The second thing that I always recommend is you document the communication. Document it. So if this had to go legal or you had to go to HR, you have all the proof on your side, whether it's email communication, WhatsApp communications, perhaps in minutes of meetings, perhaps somebody was around you when you did have the conversation. You can document what they have seen and have them as collateral to be able to confront it should this go maybe a bit further down the legal route. Number 3, self-care outside of work. Look after yourself. And I know this sounds very airy-fairy and doesn't seem like anything to do with the bullying, but the truth is you do need to preserve and conserve your coins to be able to deal with the bullying. So make sure that you do look after yourself outside of work, whether it's good, healthy relationships, diet, exercise, sleep, a sense of purpose outside of work, hobbies. Make sure that you have the energy.
In other words, don't eat, sleep, breathe your job, because it might be sapping your strength, not making you better.
Exactly right. That's exactly to the point.
So I know you've got more of these points, but there is this niggling irritation in the back of my mind about people who claim that they're being bullied when they're really not. They're just shit at their jobs. How do you know that's not you? Because you might actually be, constructively getting yourself into these situations without even realizing it.
Right. So one of the points that, apart from speaking up early, is that you need to communicate. Whether it's you communicate to the person that you feel is bullying you, or you need to communicate directly to HR and with the intention of communicating the rules of the game. So if I feel that I'm being bullied, and perhaps to your point, Gareth, if I feel that I'm being bullied, but I'm actually not doing my job accurately, and I do speak up and I turn to the person that's so-called bullying me and I go, this is what I feel. And the person comes back and goes, well, these are the rules of the game, and this is what I expect from you. These are your KPIs, and this is the roadmap to your success, and this is why you're not achieving it. then through that communication, I'll be able to ascertain whether I'm gaslighting myself, because that's possible, or I'm being gaslighted by the bully. But healthy communication through the rule set is very, very important.
All right. So back to your things that you can do.
So
I interrupted.
I said,
you halfway through.
No, great. So you speak up early, you document the information, you self-care. Number 4, you do your research. Make sure you know what the policies are that have been put together by your work, by your corporate, that counteract or deal with these kind of situations. So know your policy. Talk to the person. So it's okay to communicate and actually say, hey, listen, this is what I feel. This is what's going on. But remember, document all the information. Talk to the person. Speak up. Say, this is what I feel. This is what's been going on. Or is there an issue? Is there a problem? Can I do things better? Can you do things better? Can we have an open communication around this thing that's going on between us? Can we renegotiate the rules of the game? Second last thing, HR. If you need to escalate to HR, that's completely appropriate. Again, we're not creating a big circus. We're just having a conversation. And I need to go back to point 1. You do it early so it doesn't turn into a big circus. Because the moment you turn to somebody or you turn to HR and say, listen, I've been bullied for the last 3 years. Now it's a big deal. Versus, hey, this is what happened last week. I want to address it early. It happened with this person. What are the policies? What are the procedures? What can I do? What can you do to ensure that this doesn't happen again, or to correct whatever's been going on? And the last thing that I want to mention, which I have seen in my practice, which is not a bad idea, should all of this fail, is look for an alternative job. There's nothing wrong with building up your CV and building up your confidence through having alternatives. The moment you don't have any alternative and this is the only thing that is going for you and the only option that you have, you might be desperate. And therefore, when you're desperate, you might accept things that normally you would never accept. So I give the analogy of when you're desperate, you accept things that you wouldn't. Imagine you have not eaten for 3 weeks. And I present to you the one food that now you look at and you go, I would never eat this. Well, I'm telling you, if you're desperate in 3 weeks' time, you would eat anything. Anything that I put in front of you, you would eat because you're desperate. And that happens in relationships too, by the way. When I'm desperate, I would accept anything that is put in front of me because I'm desperate. And when it comes to a job, it's not dissimilar. If I'm desperate, I will accept substandard behavior. So therefore, having alternatives and judging your worth based on the alternative is a good option.
I call that the law of 2 feet, and I've always applied it to myself. If I'm really unhappy somewhere, then I've got to get up on my own 2 feet and walk out of the door. And there's no one who can be more empowered than the person who decides they're going to do that. Even in a market where maybe you think, oh well, I don't know if I'm going to get another job, etc., etc. You got to put those things aside. If you value yourself more than being abused, you'll do that. And it's a tough thing for some people to do, but you've got to think about that as the logical outcome if you're going to say no more, right? Doc, this is important. Yes. I don't want us to breeze past this. You mentioned HR. HR departments are inevitably run by women. I don't think there's a single HR department in South Africa that isn't run by women. Why is that? And in this particular complaint that we had, they were talking about women bullying women. Why is that a thing? Let's not breeze past it. If it was men, we'd be talking about toxic masculinity. We'd be talking about all of that shit. And we've just had Father's Day. God knows there isn't stuff to unpack there. What's this? I mean, we're not going to ignore this and pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah. So we know from research that women are more equipped and gravitate more towards dealing with people, and men are generally more gravitated to deal with things. So generally women would fill up these roles a lot quicker, and there would be a better fit to dealing with people in HR, and hence these departments are filled with women. But the reason why, you must understand, the way you move up the social or the career hierarchy is not through being soft, it's through being tough and through fending off threats and through being maybe manipulative. And I don't mean manipulative even in a negative sense, but through playing the game quite quite shrewdly and quite well. And the women that get to the top, just like the men do, they play the game shrewdly and they play the game intelligently and they play by specific rules that are very smart. So the women that get there, they don't want to relinquish their position either. They got there through sweat, blood, and tears. Nobody's given, or very few, we think that people are given their position just because they look pretty, but people work hard for their position, especially in corporates where you have to fight and fend off some threats. So many of these so-called these people that are getting bullied, they're getting bullied by men and women, but the reason why these women bully them is because these are very powerful women that would not give up their position for nothing. They want to fight it off, and the moment they see a threat by another woman, they're not just going to be taking it lying down. They will naturally fight it off quite viciously.
Absolutely. All right. I think that's a valuable point to throw in there. Just because it was brought up especially in the email, so I didn't want to just pretend it wasn't part of the discussion. All right, Doc, there's so much more to unpack. I hope you had a happy Father's Day. Did your kids make a little fuss of you?
No, it was very, very cute and very special. I felt needed, wanted, acknowledged. It was magnificent. All
right, we've got to talk about Father's Day, and we've got to talk about the role of fathers, and it's something that I think in South Africa
definitely
it's a big event. It's a big story, even if people don't always feel comfortable talking about it. So we've got to discuss that at some point. Just pencil that in one of our sessions to talk about fathers.
Absolutely.
And role models. Big thing in South Africa. All right, Dr. Hanan Bushkin, very nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Nice to see you guys. All right.
Good to have you on the show this morning. It is Monday morning with Dr. Hanan, but it's also Monday morning with Collectomania, and that's coming up next. Stick around for that and a whole lot more. Leigh-Ann, Mole, and I are here to look after you between now and 8 o'clock. Don't you go anywhere. We want to hear from you too in the comments. So drop us a comment on either the YouTubes, or you can send us an email. contact@cliffcentral.com. We want to know what's on your mind.
Some people want to forget all about the 80s. Some people would prefer not to remember the hairstyles, the movies, the fashion, those pants we used to wear. God, those pants we used to wear. Some people would prefer to never hear an 80s song ever again. We are not those people. That 80s show. Music, movies, obscure references, and so many unchecked factoids. Fridays, 9 a.m. on Cliff Central. People say we're stuck in the 80s, like it's a bad thing.
All right, it's time for us to pick up the conversation on this Monday morning, see what you're talking about, what you're thinking about. Let us know in the comments, and we want to get cracking on a whole bunch of stories that are in the news this morning. We spoke to Dr. Hanan just a moment ago about bullying in the workplace. And there are a few comments about that from people who realized suddenly, oh my God, I'm being bullied. This is, here she is. Where is she? Hang on. Dear Linda. She's like, oh my word, I just realized I'm being bullied in the workplace. So yes, this is a serious thing. And Parallel Parking says, my friend was born very short. His brother told him that if he didn't want to be bullied at school, he was to hit the first 3 people who spoke to him on his first day. He did it and it worked. That's one way to do things, I suppose. I think what Gareth is trying to say is there are those hypersensitive people that bring this kind of thing onto themselves. Well, I don't know if you saw a big story in the news in America over the course of last week was at the Washington Post. There was this, the short story is, because it gets quite complicated. One of their senior journalists who'd been there a long time, the Washington Post, of course, is the newspaper of record that brought Watergate to the nation's attention just about 40 years ago, maybe 44, 45 years ago.
40, 45?
40, 45, 45 years. Anyway, so that's the newspaper that famously outed Richard Nixon. There was the whole Deep Throat saga about how, you know, he was essentially recording and trying to influence his opposition party's internal workings. And it all took place in the Watergate building. A big story that I don't need to tell you about. Anyway, this journalist who works for that newspaper retweeted somebody who made a joke, said something like, all women are bi. It just depends on whether they're bisexual or bipolar, right? But it's but it's like a joke. It's a stupid joke. It's not the greatest joke. As Bill Maher said, it's a throwaway joke, which is the point. You throw it away if you don't like it. Anyway, some woman at the Washington Post started tweeting about this, and she dug up this tweet, which he, of course, deleted immediately. He was like, oh, I'm so terribly sorry. I didn't mean this, because, you know, that's what you have to do. You have to flail and whip yourself and self-flagellate for hours and hours and hours online when you've made a joke that someone didn't like. Anyway, this other journalist, and I say journalist in inverted commas, who works there, her name is Felicia Sonmez. She decided to go on an absolute tirade about how unacceptable this joke was, how the Washington Post needs to take action, because she didn't like a joke, right? Because she was upset by a joke. Her employer then needs to fire somebody. There needs to be an investigation. This person was really causing a lot of trouble. And she went on this, I don't know, it must have been like 20, 30 tweet tirade where she started saying that, you know, it's a toxic place to work in because of jokes like that, and just the super sensitive millennial bullshit. And they eventually fired her, which is about right. And she's probably never going to get work again, which is probably also about right, because she seems like a real pain in the ass to work with. And the reason I brought up all of that stuff with Dr. Hanan is because it does seem to me that we are pandering to the lowest common denominator in work at the moment. It seems that if you make enough of a fuss and you make enough of a noise in some companies, that is all it takes for that company to bend over backwards to try to accommodate you. Instead of what they should do, which is to fire your ass and to find someone else to take your job. Yeah. You know, if you're a troublemaker in an institution and you're not helping productivity, you're not helping the bottom line, and you behave like this Felicia Sonmez woman, you should be fired. You're a problem. You're making it hard for all the other people to do their work.
I mean, throughout what Dr. Hanan was talking about as well, I was thinking to as short a time ago as 15 years ago in the workplace. I didn't even know at that stage what HR did. I thought, you know, they sort out your, you know, they onboard you, which they now call it, and give you what you need. And then you don't ever see them again or speak to them. They kind of give you information about what's going on at the company, and that's about it. And someone commented earlier and said HR is for the company, not for the employees.
Correct.
But also, in the days before social media, before something like this would have blown up, like you've just spoken about, those things were just handled internally or ignored completely. And it's all about now the company thinking about how they're perceived by everybody who's watching them online. And another thing that I wanted to bring up as well was that, before all of this social media started, we didn't realize that we were being bullied. We just thought it was the way things were. I mean, I remember at one stage being slapped on the bum by the station manager as I arrived at work. Morning, slapped me on the bum. What was I going to do about that? You kind of told your parents at that stage when you went home.
Sure.
And also to the point.
I don't think anyone's saying that anything goes, and that the place is like the Wild West.
No, for sure.
You do whatever you want, but it seems to me like
there's a lot more protection now.
Yeah, but the super sensitive way that some people respond to absolutely everything in the workplace, as if it's meant to be their therapy session when they go into work. That is not how it works. It's not about you. It seems that this focus on the self has been taken to extraordinary lengths by some people who actually need to just be told, no, you were hired to do a job. If you won't do your job, someone else will. It's not your company. You don't get to dictate how we behave. I saw that Kraken, which is the gaming company, have decided they are going strictly anti-woke. They've given their employees an option of like being paid for the next 40 days and leaving if they don't like the culture, or they can stay, but no more woke shit. They've said if you complain to HR about any of this, like, Black Lives Matter, Pride Month bullshit, then they said you're out, because we're just not interested in that anymore. Kraken, of course, a gaming company, so it's probably mostly men, but I would venture a guess that probably it won't affect their bottom line. In fact, it may even help stimulate it a little bit, because companies have become distracted. It's like when everyone's around the water cooler every day or the coffee machine, and all they're doing is gossiping, you don't get anything done.
But it's about standing on your own 2 feet as well, and defending yourself from the beginning. Looking at that comment about the short guy whose brother gave him advice to just punch the first 3 people.
Right.
The first time I was spoken badly to by a senior, I said to them right from the beginning, you won't be speaking to me like that again. And it never happened again.
Exactly.
I didn't turn to social media or report them. You've got to, it does get to the point, yes, but you've got to stand on your own 2 feet. What happened to that?
Absolutely. If you don't stand up for yourself in that situation, and I know that there are a lot of people who will say, and they probably have a point, that some people don't have the confidence to do that. They come from an abusive background. They're used to being treated badly. They're not sure how to stand up for themselves, and that's all valid. I'm not going to denigrate that or say that that's nonsense. It's very, very important that people stand up for themselves. But if you can't, then you need to seek help. But that help isn't going to come from the workplace. The workplace is not interested. It is not a nursery school for adults. And this Washington Post story just reminds me again that there are a lot of people in the workplace who just were never taken out of their nappies. Once you go to the workplace, you have to be responsible for yourself. I see a lot of people who expect the company to make decisions about their health, especially around coronavirus. Does the company mandate that we must wear masks, that we must sanitize, that we should be tested? Well, it shouldn't be the company's business to do any of that, actually. That should be your responsibility. I've never been in an employment situation where someone else paid my medical aid. I've never been in a situation where someone else paid for my education. I've never been in a situation where someone else paid for my insurance or anything else. This is all part of a kind of corporate package that some places offer these days. And what it does,
and it's become expected.
And it babies people. It makes people feel like the company they work for is actually their mommy or daddy. And they're not. The company you work for is there to get the best out of you for them. And if you can ride the wave as well as possible and make yourself indispensable and make yourself the best at what you do, you will be rewarded monetarily, but that's it. It's a purely transactional thing. If you don't like the idea that it's transactional and you think that the workplace is also your family, I don't know that that's so healthy.
Yeah. These benefits have also become a big bargaining tool when it comes to
Huge.
either poaching someone or for someone to make a decision between two companies, when they're looking for employment.
Right.
And so that's how they've kind of piled upon each other and added up.
Yeah, stand up for yourself, but also don't think that the company is going to bend over for you, because that's just not how companies work. The company is not interested in your mental health. Even if you're the most important person in the company, even if you're the founder of the company, if you're no longer doing what you need to do to add value there, you need to go. And that's not just about standing up for yourself. That's also about doing what's right for the company. Things change. Evolution. We were talking about evolution earlier. With regard to Revlon. If it's not working for you anymore, get up and stand up for yourself and walk out.
Yeah.
That's the best thing you can sometimes do.
Yeah, that's another thing that's changed over the years in terms of the corporate mindset, is that it used to be admired if you stuck with a company for 50 years and, got the gold watch when you retired. And now it's not like that. Some people are with a company for 2 weeks before they move on.
Right.
And it's no longer really frowned upon. It's seen as better for your CV if you've held more positions than just one position for the last 40 years.
Yeah, but again, thanks to Oprah and everyone else, people live in this fantasy world where everything is about them. They're the main character in this movie, and everybody else is just the side character. And if they're not getting the main character treatment, then they start sulking, or getting on antidepressants, or taking drugs or drinking too much or whatever. It's not about you in every situation. I realized that a long time ago. It's not about me when someone compliments me on the show. It's really about their experience of the show. It's not about me if someone says something critical about the show. It's really about the way they perceive things. It's got nothing to do with me sometimes. Sometimes I'm just an object in their story. And sometimes you have to realize you might just be an object in someone else's story. Maybe this isn't the Gareth Cliff or the Leigh-Ann Mole movie. Other people's movies.
And it's about work ethic too. If you want to make it about yourself, then look at your own performance. Are you happy going to bed at night knowing that you've done everything that you could for the day in your job, even if you're working for someone else? If you're making it about yourself, then look at your own work ethic.
Right. Well, Empty Apology says things do change, GC. I've met a few awesome managers who will listen to everything you have to say. One just needs to speak clearly. Yeah, but that's not their job. I mean, managing people is obviously a part of it is listening to other people and hearing what they have to say and making sure that their concerns are taken care of. Certainly what we try to do in our business, and this is not due to me or any understanding of HR from my point of view, but because largely of my business partner, Rena, she's the one who gets this. It's really important that what we do is we also grow people, that we help people to find the best that they can do and to help them learn things that they wouldn't have learned anywhere else and improve, not just for us, but for the job market in general. So anyone who leaves Cliff Central usually leaves with skills they didn't come in with. They leave with abilities, with a CV that they didn't have when they joined. And that's cool. That's what we want. We want to see people develop. And I think that's really, really special. And it's very important.
Yeah,
but Empty
absolutely.
Apology, it is not the job of your managers to sit and talk to you every time you're going through something. That's what therapists are for. Again, don't start to think of your company as your family. That's very dangerous, right?
Yeah. It's almost as if we need a little bit more of the 40s work ethic back in our lives, where you kind of went to work and did your job and, you dealt with everything else out of the workplace.
I mean, it's like a happy medium, right? You don't want to go all the way to the extreme where because you think about these companies that I went to visit in Silicon Valley in 2016. It became like an adult playground. They had little sleeping nests for the people who worked there. There's a cafeteria with all this amazing food. They had like Chinese or Japanese, or they had Thai or Vietnamese, and then they had Russian food, and they had food from Brazil, and it was like a daycare center for adults, effectively. And they had a little library where you could take out a book, and they had this place where you could go and get a massage during work hours. But what they actually wanted to do was keep everyone on the campus, and they even called it campus, the whole day, so that they worked and worked and worked and worked. Now, unless you're an idiot, you see through that. You see that all of those little perks, the cafeteria and the massages and everything else, all designed to just keep you working and make you belong to the company and separate your life from any world outside of work mattered less than the world inside of work. And I think a lot of people have become a bit sort of Stockholm syndromed in the workplace, because these big companies have tried so hard to be great employers that they've actually become parents, proxy parents. And I agree with you. We don't want to go back to the 40s where you like clocked in, went into the, workhouse, like moved shit around, did heavy labor, manufactured stuff in a dangerous, probably workplace with no care at all for whether or not you died on the production line. We don't want to go back to that, but we want a bit of both, because you are not the child of your employer. And if you think you belong at work more than you belong in your own life, that's a problem. We need to even it out.
I think what the pandemic taught us is that those benefits, like having different cuisines available and sleeping pods and library nooks, are actually much less important to employees than being able to just get your job done. And by taking out commuting out of that, and now the cost of commuting, especially out of that, and giving them the ability to be available for those things that would have been a huge crisis if you weren't allowed to leave the office, that now you can just sort out at home, whether it's a sick child or burst geyser. Those things before used to give people such anxiety, and now you can just get it done. And you want to be at home spending more time just getting the job done.
100%. And obviously that depends on how motivated you are yourself. I mean, for many people, coronavirus was a blessing in disguise, and something that they're not too loud about, but they're really thrilled happened, because they can find a work-life balance which they couldn't find before doing a 9-to-5 job. Especially if we had Father's Day yesterday. If you're a dad and you literally spent every waking hour in the workplace, you just never saw your kids. Now, at least, if you're working from home some of the time, and I don't believe that we've really found that balance yet, but for some people, it's very good. If you're self-motivated, you can work at home. You can get a lot more done. For other people, it's made them lazy. And you've got to be honest and objective enough to analyze yourself and go, this has made me better, or it's made me worse. And if you can look yourself in the mirror and actually say, well, it's actually made me a bit worse, then you got to get back into the office. If it's made you a bit better, then stick it out, keep working, do as much as you can, and teach others how to do the same.
Or go for the hybrid, which is very much available now in many job offerings, where you're doing 2 days a week at work in the office.
I mean, Congo Chris says you're both working from home. I think your insights are biased. You may be right. You may be absolutely right. I mean, I know for a fact that there are some people who cannot work from home because their work doesn't allow them to. I was talking to a biokineticist the other day, and she said, obviously her job, she has to be in the office. There's no way that she can do what she does from home. So again, this may be a completely theoretical discussion for people who are in certain businesses. Having your own business will teach you very quickly what work is about. Gary, absolutely right. And that's not to say that people who don't have their own businesses are in any way inferior. They have a different role in society. Just like someone who starts their own business, there's an appetite for risk. There's an appetite for failure. There's a huge amount of self-reliance. There's nothing for you to fall back on. You take a holiday, you don't earn, that kind of thing. That's not for everybody. And in every family, there are people who are better at the one and not the other. Yeah.
And like you say, this is a theoretical discussion. I mean, you can't be a bus driver or a surgeon without being, in the theater or in the bus.
Yeah, I mean, there were those companies, and Paul actually brings this up. Krupp Steel had the ultimate company structure. Krupp in Germany, they had a company store, they had a company school, they had company housing, but then you really do belong to the company. And if you're prepared to put your kids into the Krupp school, that then they're going to grow up to be employees at the same company. I don't know if that model really has a place in the world at the moment. I think people like to move around. The idea of being in one job your whole life long is just not something most people are comfortable with anymore.
Not anymore, no. And I mean, it's putting really all your eggs in one basket. What happens if you lose your job? You lose absolutely everything in that situation.
100% right. Yeah.
I mean, one things that are tailor-made for us.
Yeah, nothing's ever tailor-made for you. If it was tailor-made for you, it wouldn't be work. There's a certain amount of discomfort. There's a certain amount of stuff that you have to do that you don't love doing, that makes your job maybe less wonderful than you think it is. That's why it's called a job. Otherwise, you'd refer to it as playtime. This is fun. Let's do this every day. Nobody on earth, even the people who you are most jealous of, when you go to sleep at night and you think, that's the job I'd like. Promise you, the people who are doing that job right now, they've got problems with it too.
It's always this romantic idea until you get into it yourself.
Yeah,
I tended to do that. I used to do that when I was younger. I think, especially, and I'm talking about jobs that I had while I was at school or while I was studying. I used to think it must be really cool to work at the gym because, I love the gym. I love going to gym until you're behind the desk and doing the work. It completely de-romanticizes everything. I love this restaurant, this Italian trattoria, until you're slaving behind serving trays and serving people, then you lose all of your love for it. Until you're in the position, you don't realize how cuck it can be.
Well, here's a point being made by Space Brother. Space Brother says it's the employees that are the market now. Companies have to adjust their value proposition to retain talent. That's true. I mean, it always used to be that you wanted to work for a certain company. Now, if you're the talented, skilled person, you also bring a certain amount of bargaining power to the table, which before maybe you didn't. It used to be that the company hired people that they thought were the best. Now, if you have a certain skill set or you have experience or you are the person that they absolutely need to fill a role, they have to bend over backwards to get you to come to them, right? And that's a different kettle of fish to the way it always used to be. I think that's a very valid point.
It's a good position to be in, that's for sure.
It's a great position to be in. And I think also working from home sounds like studying at home, says Reisebek. Too many distractions. Go and study at the library. Again, some people, remember, it's not possible to work from home for some people. There are kids running around. There's not enough space at home. They don't have a defined particular place where they can actually work from. It's just not possible for some people. And actually getting out of the house is a huge relief to some people because you're not trapped in this craziness that most people's households really are, especially if there's a lot going on in that household. So this is not going to go away as a discussion. This is going to be part of our conversation for years going forward because everything's been thrown up in the air. I'll tell you what, there was a point in, maybe 4 or 5 years ago where I considered the opportunity, the possibility of doing this show from home. And I thought if I even suggest this, people will say you're being lazy. And then coronavirus came along and suddenly it wasn't just practical, it was essential. You had to do it. And there was no way we would have made this show work otherwise. So it's a bit of both. It's a little bit of everything. You've got to really figure out your own path. And for some businesses, it's possible to find some middle ground. For others, it's not. This is interesting. Here, Congo Chris always making it about porn and sex. Japan has only 70 male porn actors in a $50 billion industry. You could be smart and become a male porn actor in Japan. Who knew, huh? So if that's true, I don't know that it is, and I'm not going to say that Congo Chris is making it up. But these days, even the porn industry has been changed. Most porn actors are working from home, right? They're doing OnlyFans. They don't need to be on a set with another porn actor doing things. You could just call up one of the other porn actresses and do it from home. You probably charge
Sex
more.
couldn't be safer.
It couldn't be safer, right? You just do that from home.
No need to bag it.
No need to go to Japan either. Do it from home. You do it, Congo.
Yeah.
Lead the way, Congo, Chris. Let's see what you can do. Kutsa says load shedding can be a problem if you're working from home. Could also be a problem if you're working from work because, again, a lot of these offices have been running at half capacity, so they've switched off their generators. There are all those big law firm buildings in Sandton. I don't like to take pleasure at anyone's misfortune, but law firms, I think I reserve a little bit of nastiness for, because really that a lot of people in law firms are just parasites on civilization, and that's not saying too much. Lawyers, I studied law. A lot of lawyers are very good at what they do. They perform a useful service in society. I've got lots of friends who are lawyers. I studied with many of them. I've got family who are lawyers. But really, to see some of those buildings, those huge, big corporate head offices for all the big law firms, and to imagine that they're sitting there and that there's so many of them that are just empty, it kind of gives me a bit of a thrill, I won't lie. And it's costing them money because they built these enormous, flashy buildings, where they're going to have a gym inside and all those things that we were talking about with Google just now, little sleeping pods, beautiful meeting rooms, corner offices with views over the Sandton skyline, and there's no one in there. And if there are any people in there, if there are people in there, they're not the executives, they're the workers in the middle and at the bottom. So I wonder how that's working out for them. Talk about a bad investment. Sure. If you want to take bad advice, then ask the big law firms about property. It would seem that they have performed the worst out of everyone, right? I mean, it's worth noting that, if nothing else. So
ask property companies about property, especially commercial property, and how things have changed.
All right, it is time for Collectomania, which is brought to you by the South African Gold Coin Exchange and the Scoin Shop. You can check them out at scoinshop.com, and they have an amazing array of coins for you to invest in. Pretty much the only thing you could be investing in right now that wouldn't be going down is gold. Gold, platinum, silver, those are the things to focus on. You can get them all at the Scoin Shop. Check them out on their website, scoinshop.com, and you'll be pleased you did. Now, if you're a collector of interesting things or unusual things, then you need to get in touch with us on contact@cliffcentral.com. That's the email address. We want to find out about you and your collections. I was strong-armed by Dori and Simpiwe into doing a collection of mine today. So I'm going to take you through. I'm going to take you through a collection of my books. I think we've done the elements and the periodic table, which I did a while ago. I've got a little lab at home, and I collect.
And I don't think we've done your sword collection yet.
Listen, I realized I got a problem, and it's definitely a family problem. We featured my brother and my sister on the show before. We all collect things. My dad collects too. My mom collects too. So I think we have a problem as a family. But I've been collecting books ever since I can remember. I had one of these collections that is behind me here of encyclopedias. I think it's these Britannicas right behind me that got me through high school. I used to go to sleep at night and read from cover to cover over a period of like 10, 20 nights, the whole encyclopedia, just because I was curious about learning about everything. And I know that sounds super boring and so nerdy, but it got me to love books, and I've collected all the books that I'm interested in. I've got very specific interests when it comes to books, but I've found over the years that the one thing I cannot stop myself from spending money on is books. And it seems ridiculous in 2022 because these days you can get everything on a Kindle. Why bother buying the book itself? You could pretty much find any book you like, even the very old, very rare books. You can find PDF versions of them and read those on a Kindle. But there's something about a book that just has always turned me on. And it's something that I'll never, ever stop collecting. I've run out of space in my house at the moment because of this.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing is, just to go back to the encyclopedias, for instance, reading those from cover to cover, and I can completely identify it. And if we're nerds, then we're nerds. But even a dictionary or an atlas, those sorts of reference books are fabulous to look through. And if you think about it, it's pretty much like browsing Google. with something in a subject that you like.
Well, it is.
Especially from the days when we didn't have the internet.
I mean, you remember how obsessed I was with Google Earth because I'd been looking at atlases and map books for most of my life. And I've always been fascinated with how cities are laid out and, how geography generally seems to work and where people like to live. And now you can see aerial photographs of pretty much any place on Earth. And before I'd have to look at an atlas. I can still draw a map of the world by memory because I've looked at atlases so much of the time. Anyway, let me take you through some of these. I've got a lot of books here, so we'll start with. Let me start with a specific collection I've got here. So, in my library downstairs, I have a whole section on genealogy and heraldry, which is basically the study of bloodlines and of weapons, arms, essentially. Wappen, they call them in German. So this is a whole selection of my books. Some of these are very old. Some of them are very difficult to find. Some of them I've collected because, you just can't find them anymore. But these books have to do with family history. They're reference books, really. So not particularly valuable to people who are not interested in reference books about genealogy and heraldry. And I've been collecting them for years. So you can see that.
Would a visitor to your home be able to look up their own, what did you call it? Genealogy. Look up their own genealogy in these books, or are they your family tree only?
Sometimes I haven't collected only about my family. There's some of these books that have no mention of anybody that I'm related to in them, but really they're terrific reference books. I'll take you through some of them quickly, but let me show you. There's a set of those blue ones in the middle there that's called The Blood Royal by the Marquis de Rouvigny. And he basically compiled the most remarkable source material for all of the descendants of the Tudors in England, which was, they were the royal family in about the 1600s. And there are only, let me not overestimate this now, there are only about 4,000 or 5,000 people who can claim to descend directly from these people and actually prove it. So it's an interesting roll. It's called the Tudor roll. This is the descendants of Edward IV, Henry VII, and James of Scotland. And what's interesting about these books is they will actually set out the exact family lines. So if you can trace your great grandparents or your great great grandparents and they turn up in one of these books, it's a nice lineage to have. It's interesting.
I'd say
it puts you in a group of maybe 4,000, 5,000 people in the world. And remember, some of those are gone extinct, so it may be less or it may be more, depending. That can claim these lines of descent. And it's interesting because then you can read about people in history, and you're not just reading about arbitrary objective people in history, but you're reading about people you're actually descended from, which makes quite interesting reading. There's a great section on in my library of genealogy and heraldry, which has to do with books called Burke's Peerage. These are the books that outline and go into the family lines and the coats of arms of every family in Britain that has a title. So Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales. This one is a 1953 coronation edition. So the Queen was crowned in this year. And it's quite a cool reference book too, because it has lots and lots of really interesting, you can look up people who are actually alive now. If they were born in 1953, they're in this book. And what's amazing about this book is it actually gives you their addresses. It's like a yellow pages of the aristocracy. And this is also got all the British orders of knighthood in there and all the rest of it. There's another series of books called Armorial Families, which has got the most beautiful drawings and illustrations in it of the coats of arms of pretty much everyone who, in order to be called a gentleman in medieval and post-medieval Europe, you had to have a coat of arms. If you didn't have a coat of arms, you were considered just an ordinary peasant. But if you had a coat of arms, you were a gentleman. That was actually the definition of a gentleman, that they could look you up in this book and you would be in there, and therefore you'd be a respectable sort of person. Of course, it wasn't always true, but it was interesting. So this book has been for generations. It's the 7th edition that I've got, and the 7th edition was published in the 1930s. So you can imagine how old this book is, and some amazing, amazing illustrations in there. So this is more interesting to me because it tells you something about, the quality of art that's gone on. This is something called the Almanach de Gotha. These are very, very hard to find. Published in 1908. These were mostly
Are these almanacs and records and all these what's the word I'm looking, categorization of people? Is it continuing, and is it continuing on paper?
Yeah, they do it now. In fact, in this picture of the sort of reference library, you see those red books on the one shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all fairly new. I think the ones there are a 2008 edition. There's a volume of 3, and that has the most up-to-date information that you can get. I don't think they bring them out every year anymore, but they do keep doing them. So the Gotha is a very, very old collection of family trees and family histories from probably about the late 800s AD. And a lot of these records were destroyed by the Russians during the end of the Second World War. And so these books are a kind of treasure trove of knowledge that you can no longer find the original documents for. And this book is particularly interesting. It's filled with portraits that are hand drawn of people in various various positions and with various sort of family lines. All kinds of interesting stuff there. So I'm going to take you to something. And by the way, in the Gotha, they also go through these kinds of things. So they will list the families that are in there. And a lot of it is really, really ancient history. Tremendously interesting old stuff. But then if I move on to more interesting and particular books, I've got a series of very old books. Here's Robert Burns. It's a terrible picture. I took it in a bit of a hurry last night. But a whole bunch of Robert Burns stories, which I actually read. People will walk in and they'll say, well, oh, those look like nice books. Do you read them? And I go, well, they're not for show. I mean, these are pretty cool too. There's some, what are these? Hang on a second. Let me just check. Because these are
Do you have any that are handmade?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these would be handmade. Those old ones at the top, on the top shelf there that's Rollins' Roman history. So again, this will be the most interesting stuff to look through if you're curious about how Roman history went through all the different reigns of all these different emperors. And of course, you can find this information online now. So it's not as if it's the kind of thing that people can't find anymore. Reading the encyclopedia, says Dr. Robin, check out the writer A.J. Jacobs. He went through the entire encyclopedia and wrote a book about it, The Know-It-All. It's fantastic. Yeah. Well, I mean, just to go back to these pictures, I got lots and lots of old books, and some of them are handmade. They're bound in calf hide or leather, and I'll get to some of those in a moment or two. But I've also got a bunch of books that were signed, first editions effectively for me. I met Madeleine Albright, the Secretary of State for Bill Clinton, in San Francisco once, and she actually signed the book for me, which is quite cool. I don't know whether that increases the value of it particularly. I'm not collecting books for their monetary value. I'm spending more on them than they're probably worth because I want to have them. I've got something which I think a lot of South Africans have, a signed Nelson Mandela Long Walk to Freedom, which he signed for me on the 18th of July, his birthday in 2009, out in Johannesburg. So I've written a little, you can see at the bottom left there, I've written a bit of an inscription so that people know when it was signed.
Yeah.
My
dad actually does that. He, with every book that he's had, that he's kept his whole life, he's written in the front where he got it or who gifted it to him. Exactly if he was on a trip overseas when he bought it, what he was doing that day.
Yeah. If anyone gives me a book as a present, I make them sign it as a gift so that I can always look back and remember who gave it to me. And books are articles of record. So I don't know if you remember this guy. He's quite big on Twitter. He's called God on Twitter, the tweet of God. And this is a book called The Last Testament. Now, I used to retweet this guy a lot in the beginning of Twitter when it was still fun.
Yes.
And he eventually sent me a copy of his book and signed it to Gareth. I am God. The actual author, David Javerbaum, who signed it there as well. I mean, that was quite cool because it came all the way from America.
Awesome.
So I've got a lot of signed books. A lot of the people we've interviewed on Cliff Central, if they've sent a book to me, I like to get them to sign it, which is also very cool. So I suppose those are probably worth something. I've got a Gibbons Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which this is I think it's a second edition, so it's not a first. But this is old. This was published in London in about the early 1800s, 1823, somewhere around there. What makes this so cool is it's also got maps in it. So if you open it up, there are maps inside that are folded, and you can see the paper has kind of got those almost like tea stains on it.
Yeah.
It's the result of just aging and light damage to these books.
Have you noticed this book, for instance? Have you noticed it age while it's been in your possession?
No, I mean, I'm reticent even to open these up. Usually I keep them in books in rooms when they're not in direct sunlight, especially if I do think they're quite valuable. I suppose a Gibbon, History of the Roman Empire is quite a big, it's a nice thing to have, and I don't think there are a lot of them around. And I just love, again, Roman history. So to me, it's two things that are combined. But I also keep lots of books that are probably worth bugger all, but I use them all the time. So I've got lots of classics on my shelf. Look how used that Roget's Thesaurus is. You can't even see the word thesaurus anymore, because when I was at school, that thing was essential. I used to look up different words for a word that I wanted to use.
I don't know if we're seeing the picture.
Are you not seeing the picture yet? Hang on, let me put it back up there. Is that it? Can you see it now?
That's the maps.
No, next one. You haven't seen that yet. Don't tell me you can't see these pictures.
There we go.
Okay, so there's a very worn and very well-used Roget's Thesaurus, which, even though it's not worth a damn thing, you could probably buy. You could probably just, I don't know if anyone even buys a thesaurus anymore. You just look it up on the internet. Synonyms. But I used that thing all the time. The Penguin Book of 20th Century Speeches, which I used quite a lot. Suetonius, Plutarch, Cassius Dio, Darwin. These are all books that I read, while I was at high school, while I was at varsity, that I found really, really cool. And I've got just tons of them. And I suppose, again, they're not worth anything. They just take up space. But I can't bring myself to throw them away.
It reminds me of, I think my love of older books really began in varsity.
Oh, yeah.
Especially studying, I majored in English. So we had to buy a lot of novels. Right. And there was nothing nicer than going into a secondhand or an antique bookstore and buying one of the, earlier prints instead of just getting the modern one from the new bookstore. And certainly it saved money as well.
Definitely. Corona's Boring says the oldest book I have is a 1789 Old King James Bible with hand illustrations in every page. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Parallel Parking says my bookcase and its contents are a work of art too. I can start a new civilization with my collection, from the Bible of the King James Version all the way to Finnegan's Wake. My treasure is a copy of Sefer HaAggadah. All right. Well, that's absolutely amazing. Congo Chris says, don't lie, Leigh-Ann. You have all the smutty romance novels.
I've got a good balance of both.
All right. So here's something which I know is very rare and very precious. This is something that was given to me as a present by a friend of mine. She said to me, what do you want for your birthday? So I said, I don't know. Don't worry about it. And she said, no, what are you interested in? So I said, history and books. So she probably sent someone to go and find this. She's quite a busy human being, and she's got an important job, and I don't think she went to the shop and looked for this herself. She probably sent someone to do it. But either way, they came back with this thing, which looks incredible. You could see it's a big, heavy book. This is the frontispiece of it. It's called The History of the World. It's by Sir Walter Raleigh, and it was printed in 1614. If you look right at the bottom there.
Wow,
So this book was in existence before Jan van Riebeeck came to the Cape. Okay, that's how old this thing is. This book was in existence before King Charles I had his head cut off. This book was in existence while King Louis XIV was the King of France. It is properly old, and I think maybe worth something, because I looked it up, and it says here that this version is bound in full brown calf gilt titles, and tooling to the spine, raised bands in very good condition with the text bright, a small early paper repair to the first page on the. So this is basically, I looked up the price, and it's just horrifying. So I'm not even going to say what it is, but that was a present. And this is what it's got inside of it. Maps. Look at this. Maps of what they thought. This is before satellites, before they had really accurate measuring tools. There's India. You can see Arabia.
We don't see yet.
Hang on. Let me just try and bring it up here. Is that better? Can you see it now?
That's still the one we saw before.
Now?
Still
really
not.
hopping around here trying to get it. Hang on a second.
There, that's the other maps book.
God, this is so irritating. I don't know why it doesn't come up. Is that it now? Can you see it?
It looks like another book.
Oh,
there we've got maps now.
All right. So this is a map of, you can see Arabia, the Persian Gulf, India. It's amazing. I mean, this is all in Latin, but it's also in Old English. So the actual writing inside the book is all in Old English, and you can follow it, but it's really hard to read. And if you think,
you can see in this map how, I mean, obviously they did what they could in those days in terms of mapping, but it's certainly nowhere near as accurate as what we can get to now, or in atlases from about 100 years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, they talk there about Arabia Felix and the various parts of India extra Gangium, which means India outside of the Ganges River.
Gangnam style.
Gangnam style, exactly. Here is a very old book that I've got too. Can you see that? This is bound in vellum, which is sheepskin. Wow. And it's detailed in gold on the spine of the book, and it is it's the life and times of St. Thomas Aquinas. This is the first volume. It is from the Catholic press of Pope Ursinian in Naples. Can you see the screen at the moment? Can you see that picture?
Apparently, Peter Koenig says we see those books on the screen. Leigh-Ann doesn't.
Okay, so it's just
now,
you.
Now I don't know if I should comment at all.
so it says here in Latin, Summa contra gentiles divi Tome Aquinatus, Angelici et Ecclesiasti Doctorus. So it's basically the life and times of St. Thomas Aquinas. And if you look at the bottom, it says Neapoli, and then it's got MDCCLXXIII, which is 1773. That's the year that this was published. And it says under that, Ex Typographia Ursiniana, which means it comes from the printing press of Pope Ursinian. So this is from the Vatican. This will be a 1773 version of the Life and Times of St. Thomas Aquinas from the library of Pope Ursinian, which is pretty damn cool.
It is unbelievable. And now I'm understanding why you took such an interest in a story that I mentioned a few months back, which was about that book or books that are bound in human skin.
Oh yeah, the Necronomicon, which is also in the Vatican Library. Yeah, I remember we had that conversation. Yeah. But then I went to a local bookstore about 14 years ago, and I found this, which is pretty damn cool too. It's also up on the shelf here behind me. These are books in German, in Hochdeutsch, by Goethe, Goethe's Werke. So these are the great German poet and writer Goethe, and these are not just any Goethes, because I opened up the front cover, as I always do when I buy these things, and look at what it says there: J.C. Smuts, 1893, Isaac K. Smuts, Pretoria, and Louis Weyers, Durenkloof, Irene, 25th August 1956. So these This whole set of Goethes belonged to Jan Smuts.
Wow.
The former Prime Minister of South Africa. And I've got some Schiller and some Goethe from his library, which he would have read. This book was in the hands of our former Prime Minister,
I mean, where would you have got that from?
Bookshop. I bought it at a bookstore here down the road from my house. It's amazing because people sell books. They don't keep things all the time. So if you just look around, you'll find some pretty amazing and interesting things. Here's something you'll like, Leigh-Ann, an illustrated Shakespeare, which these are beautifully illustrated.
Ooh.
But I've taken a page out of Hamlet for you here, where you can actually see, it's got it all laid out. But I mean, if you ever need to, who doesn't need to reference Shakespeare from time to time? You may pretend that you don't do that, but it's actually a very cool thing to do. And you'll find stuff like this. The last one I want to show you, we can just talk about it a little bit, is from the National Portrait Gallery in England. I don't know who this belonged to, but it's a National Portrait Gallery, illustrious and eminent persons of the 19th century. And it's published in 1801. Okay, so here's the king, and you can see a portrait of him, King George V. Hang on, here he is, King George IV, rather, of Britain, and there his signature is underneath it, which is pretty damn cool. Jeez. And then they go ahead to print these. I think they're lithographs of every single important, eminent person, according to them, in the empire at that time. And they include people like Melville, after whom the suburb of Melville is
I thought
named.
that said Melville.
Yeah. So all kinds of interesting people. And each of them has the portrait and then a lithograph signature of each of these people underneath. So it's a very cool collection to have as well. And I mean, I'm only going to go into all the other stuff because we've run out of time. But essentially, this is what I do. I spend my day, wandering around, dusting off books, reading interesting things. And it just gives me more joy than you could possibly imagine. So when people say to me, but what do you do with your time? This is what I do. And I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but this is the stuff I like doing.
Oh, no, I think it's absolutely fascinating. Really, it's so impressive. And, we know that you have your real books behind you. No, it's not a screen. And so, we've always wondered. So it's so awesome to hear. But I do want to know what you think, and you touched on it in the beginning, of the way books have gone now. We've got digital books. We've got them on our Kindle. Some people do collect audiobooks.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see the value in that?
Sure.
It's also, it reminds me of, what do we do with all our records when CDs came about? What do we do with all our CDs when digital music came about? But, you can collect them even though they're online or digital.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If you read things on a Kindle or you listen to audiobooks, there's no difference to me between any of those things and having the actual article in your hand. It makes no difference. In fact, it's more expensive and sometimes a whole lot more useless in terms of just the space it takes up to actually collect the books. But if you read, and I don't believe that that's ever going to go out of fashion. I think the only way that we make ourselves cleverer when we're sitting on our own is to either listen or to read. And I love nothing more than to learn. Here are two of the latest books I've got right next to me. This is a new history of South Africa by Herman Guillaumier, who's a well-known professor of history. And I mean, beautifully illustrated. Sure. This has got, the story of South Africa, which I can't wait to get into because it's divided here into 4 parts. Prehistory, kind of what happened in the very beginning. Then the Great Trek and the wars of the Mfecane and the Difekane. And there's some unbelievable stuff in here that I don't know at all, that I can't wait to get my teeth into. This shit turns me on. What can I tell you?
So when you're reading a book now, a new book, do you read every word from cover to cover?
No. New books.
Because otherwise, how would you get through it?
No, new books I'll skim through. It's very hard for me to actually finish a book, especially if they I don't read fiction at all, which is a big problem. I realize I should read more fiction because it's where your imagination develops, but I can't do it. It's just not a me thing. So instead, I read nonfiction, and I'll breeze through. And if there's something that's not as interesting to me, I won't pay much attention to it. I'll skim through those paragraphs, those chapters, and go to the stuff that I really care about. Anyway, Gary points out all of these old books are printed on a letterpress, 1-page setup, 1 letter at a time, 1 page at a time. Damn. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's why I think so many of them are so valuable now. Tracy wants to know, do I have any of my grandfather's? I think you mean my great-grandfather's books. My mother has the whole collection of Gustav Preller's history books, which I've read from their house. But you better believe I'm not going to let my sister and brother get hold of any of that because they have no interest in these things. It's only me.
I'm sure it's an unwritten agreement.
Well, I don't care if they don't like it. I'm just going to take the stuff. They have no option. I'll fight them to the death, and I have guns.
And swords.
Swords. All right, so there's another one of my collections. We thought we'd throw that in this week because we've got so many other amazing people with such interesting collections. If you have an interesting collection or you know somebody who's got something cool that they want to show off, then please let us know. As you've seen from so many of the people we featured on Collectomania, there are some fascinating things that people collect. And it doesn't have to be things that are monetarily valuable. You know, they don't have to be things that have a price attached to them. They could just be things that you love. If you want to share that with us, then please do. Collectomania is what we do on a Monday, and we want to hear from you. And send us an email, contact@cliffcentral.com, so we can share your stories and your collection. It's all brought to you by...
Best collection to date. Thank you, Gareth, from Bronwyn Spring.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thanks, Bronwyn.
Very cool. I love that.
Well, I tried. I was running around trying to take pictures of all of this last night because I suddenly thought, oh, shit, we've got to show something. But hang on, I'm just looking here, even on the table in front of me. Here's something that could interest you. The Poetical Works of Robert Burns.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to open this up. May he who gives the rain to pour and wings the blast to blow protect thee frae the driving snow, the bitter frost and shower. Isn't that interesting?
Very cool.
There's a little bit of Scotch poetry to end the show this morning. But yeah, get hold of us. It's all brought to you by the South African Gold Coin Exchange and the Scoin Shop. Check them out at scoinshop.com and tell us what you collect. We want to hear all about it. Thanks for good, hopefully a really good Monday morning for you and for us. And we will catch you tomorrow at 6 a.m. bright and early. Cheers, ass. Nice to see you. Be good.
Hello.